Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Assalamu alaikum, brothers. Alhamdulillah, we have today Shaib, aka the Sunnah guy. He's going to be talking about gratitude, inshallah. So I'll pass it over to him. He's got his mic.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah. Brothers, I want to try and get through quite a bit of stuff within 20-30 minutes, inshallah. I don't want to drag it on. So there's been multiple studies done in the kind of non-Muslim, you could say, kind of self-help space when it comes to gratitude, and when it comes to what they've done in terms of research on when you wake up in the morning as the first thing to be grateful. It's one of their things. So you have a few things: cold shower, journaling, meditation, and gratitude. Right? These are some of like the four main key components of like a productive morning for a lot of the kind of contemporary and modern kind of gurus that come out and they say that this is what you should do. A lot of life coaches, etc., speak about this. And I was doing a bit of digging and I was looking at kind of why every single one of them speaks about gratitude, speaks about, writing down the things that you're grateful for. And subhanAllah, this is something that we in our religion have in abundance, where Allah Azza wa Jalla tells us in the Quran, لَإِن شَكَرْتُمْ لَأَزِيدَنَّكُمْ. If you are grateful to me, I will increase you. And he also speaks about the many blessings that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that He has given us in the Quran. For example, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about fruit. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about the sun and the moon. Allah Azza wa Jal, He speaks about the sperm. Allah Azza wa Jal speaks about your creation. Allah Azza wa Jal speaks about what He has done for you. And your Lord constantly tells you these things so that you may recognize His blessings and so that you may be grateful to Him. This is essentially what it comes down to. Sometimes we get lost in the kind of technical side of the deen, but then there is this simple, beautiful message that we often lose out on. And that is the simple things that Allah Azza wa Jal speaks about. He said, look at your cattle, look at the food that you eat. Look at yourself. Within yourselves, do you not reflect? Do you not think about the alteration of the night and the day and the sun and the moon? You don't think about these simple things. And when you can, on a very, very basic level, start to reflect upon these things, it creates this sense of awe, this sense of amazement, this sense of a human cannot do this sense of grandeur that then takes over your heart. And that ultimately is the purpose of why Allah Azza wa Jal speaks about these ayat in multitude in the Quran. And so I've learned that I've been practicing Islam close to 15 years now. The natural thing is, as you develop in the deen, you start to think about things that stimulate you more intellectually. You start to think about things that stimulate you more on a different level, on a different wavelength. You want a new flavor. You want a new angle. You want a different perspective. Wallahi, oftentimes throughout my life, I've kind of looked at the most simplest things that have brought me back to Allah Azza wa Jal. And I think to myself, what are the key anchors that keep a person steadfast? And sometimes it's just cycling back to the most simplest things and that building that connection with Allah Azza wa Jal through the favors that He has given you. That's one angle. That's the very first angle. Where no matter how far you or how deep you practice the religion or how advanced you become, we have this in our local masjid where a lot of the brothers want to study, technical kind of mutuns, and they want to study technical books and stuff like that. And subhanAllah, one time we just had a class on, the diseases of the hearts. And the lesson about shukr came up. And our teacher was speaking about shukr, and there were brothers just weeping in the class. And it's like, this is what our hearts need. And you have to question the rust on your heart that gathers. كَلَّا بَلْ رَانَ عَلَىٰ قُلُوبِهِمْ مَا كَانُوا يَكْسِبُونَ. That there appears rust on their hearts. Rust that we all are going to face. Even if you're at the foot of your journey or you're 20 years deep. This is a natural rust that we're all going to gather on our heart, on our spiritual heart. This will cloud our judgment. This will make us more cynical. This will make us read the Quran and it doesn't go past our throats. It gives us this sense of reading it as a transactional or a story or something like that. And it doesn't really affect you or impact you. So on reflection, I've kind of looked at two things. And these two things that, wallahi, if a person can have them in his life, he will not only find contentment and happiness, but he will find this sense of hilawa, this sense of sweetness in his worship. And that is humility and gratitude. When you can focus and you can genuinely, intrinsically find humility and gratitude in your worship, the life that you live transforms. Let me explain to you how. The pursuit of every single human being is one, and that is to find contentment and happiness. That is it. Every non-Muslim, every Muslim, every single one of us has one pursuit, and that is to find contentment and happiness. We all are pursuing this, and whatever we do, as Muhammad was speaking about, the self, the ego, we're serving ourselves. Every single one of us, if you look at your actions, right, in the finer detail, you kind of zoom out a little bit, and you actually introspect everything that you're doing. You're doing it to serve yourself or gratify yourself in some type of way. And what we often do is we look for that happiness and we look for that contentment in materialistic things, in things of this dunya. Whereas it's very, very simple. Happiness and contentment is actually something that we fully control. And this is actually incredible, that you fully have the control and the power to take ownership of your own happiness. And the way it works is like this. It's encapsulated in the hadith of Prophet ﷺ, where he said, look to those below you and do not look to those above you. And I asked my teacher this, and I said, should we then actively look at poor people, look at their lives, look at the lives of the people that are struggling, that are in war-torn countries? Should we do that? And he said, absolutely, yes. This is one of the things that Ibn Taymiyyah speaks about, is that you should be looking at those people that are not where you are. And this doesn't conflict ulu al-himma. This doesn't conflict having lofty aspirations. This is something that we should actively be doing to cure the rust and the disease on our hearts. Look at those below you. Look at those struggling. And I used to skip off the charity videos, the videos of Gaza. I used to skip off them because it made me feel uncomfortable and uneasy. But now, subhanAllah, I watch them and I make my son watch them. I make my son watch videos of what's happening in Gaza. And the reason is because I want him to understand, especially as a young child, the level of entitlement that we are given in this country. We're given, food is on your plate the moment you wake up. Mum's there already cooking breakfast. She's there, you wake up, put your clothes on, and kids are still complaining at the age of 6 and 7. What I want him to understand is there are people that do not have this. So what does that create in his heart? That creates a level of appreciation. Therefore, what's happening is, if this child, and look at it from a children level, if a child is always given toys, is always given the best thing, is always taken on holidays, is always lavished with gifts, that then becomes an entitlement. Now, I want you to look at it from a children because it's easy to understand. Then I'm going to scale it up to us as elders now. A child, you give him toys, you give him presents, you give him gifts, you give him lollies and sweets and all these things that he loves. He didn't ask for it, he didn't work for it, he didn't do anything for it. But you give it to him, you give them the tablets, you give them all these things. Now, what ends up happening is, the moment they live a normal life without tablets, without screen, without sweets, and without chocolates, and without holidays, that normal life feels like deprivation. Therefore, leading your child to become sad, miserable, and unhappy. One example was, I was leaving for Jum'ah one day, and my daughter, she goes to nursery. She's 4 years old. She goes to nursery, and she comes home at 12 o'clock. So she's at home at 12 o'clock now. She's with her mother, whatever, etc. I put my clothes on. I'm about to leave for Jummah. And as I leave, she's like, Assalamu alaikum, daddy, whatever, etc. And I'm putting my shoes on. My wife then says to me, she says, why don't you take her with you? And I'm in a rush right now. I'm in a big rush. I need to get out of the house. And my wife said, why don't you take her with you? This now changes everything for my daughter. My daughter went from happy, she's at home, she's just come back from nursery, okay, I'm just going to settle, I'm going to have my food, whatever. My daughter now goes from happy to extremely deprived. Because I said, no, I can't take her because I'm in a rush. She already knew I was going. She already knew I was leaving. But what ended up happening, the moment my wife said, why don't you take her? Instantly, my daughter then feels a sense of deprivation. Because in her heart, she's now missing out. therefore leading to her becoming sad and unhappy. Now scale this on our lives, scale this in every realm of your existence, in how you see things. Look at your outlook of life. When we often look at those things that we do not have, what do we feel? A sense of deprivation. But the moment you start to look at that which you do not have, subhanAllah, the hikmah of the Prophet ﷺ is so incredible. Look at those below you, do not look at those above you. The moment you start looking at those below you, instantly you feel a sense of what? You feel a sense of appreciation and gratitude. That then leads to contentment and happiness and sakina, this tranquility that you find within your heart. Now, let's look at an example that is relevant for all of us, lowering our gaze. Yeah. There is such hikmah and beauty in lowering your gaze, albeit difficult. Why is that? It's because the fact that when we lower our gaze, what do we do? And wallahi, I say the best time I've had, spending it and appreciating my wife is when I've come back from Umrah and I've spent 10 days not looking at anyone. Why? Because you come back and it's like a fresh, your woman is there, etc. You see her, you feel more happy, etc. You feel more energized. And subhanAllah, what ends up happening in the West is we have a large pool of comparison. Because previously, our grandparents would get married, and if they want to look at another woman, they would have to go out into the marketplace and probably stand in one place and then have a look, and that's a bit creepy, right? However, nowadays, if anyone wants to look at another woman, be they married or not, it's literally going to happen within the first 2 seconds of opening up your phone. That ease of access, what that's led to now, that's led to us feeling this sense of deprivation because our eyes are feasting. When your eyes start to feast, now you feel, I don't have. When you feel that, that is contributing to your sadness, without you even knowing about it. So what we all have to try and do is, in our lives, actively understand that happiness is within your own control. Happiness is something that you actually fully have full control over. At times, it's a process. It's not like lower your gaze today, you feel happy tomorrow. It's not like that. There's a cleansing process. There's a process where you actually actively lower your gaze and you find this sense of happiness enter your heart, this sense of tranquility that your iman has, your connection with Allah, your relationship with Him, and not just that, your general overall contentment. Because let's call it what it is. Let's say you married a woman who is a 6 or a 7. Alhamdulillah, at the time when you got married, you were happy, you were good, she was decent looking, etc. Kids, she puts on weight, whatever, etc. That happens and that's life. Okay, no problem. Now what ends up happening is that, you're happy with her, whatever, but the moment you start to look at other women, instantly, here's what ends up happening. Your standard of beauty was now there. But now the more eyes you have, the more times your eyes feast on other women, your standard goes from this, it goes from there. Now, here's how I'm going to do it. So look at this. So imagine when you got married, this was your standard. You just simple guy, etc., trying to get married, young guy, etc., happy. When you saw your wife, she put on a bit of weight, whatever, etc. Now you feeling a little bit of deprivation, etc. You can't lower your gaze. You now have this here. This is now your expectation. So you raise the bar now, okay? And this is what a lot of the Westerners in the self-help space say go, go for everything. You have to have high standards and There's actually a very hidden destructive message in all of this. Is that having high standards in what? Okay, cool. Well, if he doesn't do this, if he's not cleaning up, they said it to the women. If he doesn't help around the house, and get rid of him. What? That's high standards. No, that's not how we look. That's not how we look at this. There is a sense of shukr and contentment and gratitude that we have. So now, you keep. Let's say, for example, you're on Instagram, you look at women, etc. Now, this here is called. I call it the gap of deprivation. This is now the area that needs to be fulfilled. The bar of contentment and happiness was previously here. This is where you were. For you to be happy, all you had to do was hit this. When you hit this, inside your heart you felt peace, inside your heart you felt happiness, inside your heart you felt a sense of tranquility. You were good with everything. The more you feast on your eyes on women, that goes higher and higher and higher and higher. And wallahi, one of the biggest problems that we are facing in the West today is that this has gone so high. Therefore, so many other problems are happening now. Erectile dysfunction. There's a big problem with men just not being happy and content. There's this big problem with people just not satisfied in their relationships whatsoever. There is a sense, and I'm not saying that, at the end of the day, as men, you can have more wives, right? But that's not the point. The point being is that from a intrinsic perspective, from your qalbi perspective, from your heart, where is your heart at? Expand this on everything in life: where you live, what you do, who your friends are, the environments you live in, etc. Your homes, your holidays, all these things. You had that expectation, and now it's there. Now let me give you guys the perfect example. My wife, when I first got married, she was, this was in like the honeymoon phase, right? I went out with the brothers, and we were eating like peri-peri chicken. I can't remember what it was. I ordered a chicken wrap, and I already had like about a few grilled chicken pieces. Then I ordered a chicken wrap thinking I'm still a bit hungry, but I really wasn't. I just ordered it because it looked nice. All right, cool, I got it. I took a bite out of the chicken wrap, a couple of bites. I said, SubhanAllah, I'm full now, boys. I'm gonna take this home. And then I went to, I then basically took the bite, I wrapped it up, whatever. And they said, what are you gonna do with it? I said, I'll give it to my wife. One of the brothers looked at me in shock, like, what? Oh my God, she's not gonna accept that. She's not. What do you mean, bro? Like, I take this back home. It's not that deep, whatever. So my wife is from Pakistan. Okay, so she's from the village. So my wife doesn't have that expectation. Remember, her life. I was sharing something personal, but her life, her standard of what is, a good life or a bad life is very low, very, very low. She's grown up with cows and chickens, right? So for her, now she's here, like she's just so grateful and happy to be in England, right? So it's amazing right now for her. She's just loving it, and it's beautiful. And that's contributing towards her happiness. It's an existential, play here for her. She's just, alhamdulillah, so grateful. I took the chicken wrap home, and she just said, oh my God, you thought of me. Oh my God, alhamdulillah, like, thank you so much for, and it was half bitten, right? But thank you so much that you thought of me. And it was an easy win, right? But then I thought to myself, subhanallah, I did this now 5 years later. And I did that, and wallahi, this is live stream. All hell broke loose. How are you giving this to me? I don't understand. What am I, some piece of crap? Like, you. And subhanallah, what is this? That's because she didn't manage her expectations, right? Over the years. And us as men, us as the people that have to maintain the household, etc., it's more important for us to manage our expectation and manage the gap of deprivation. So the more you look, the more you want and desire. So you can look, but what ends up happening is you understand that this is not for me. I'm going to lower my gaze. I have to fight back. I have to hold back. But if you look and you let loose, then what ends up happening is that bar keeps going higher, 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 higher. Therefore, your life satisfaction is very, very difficult. 3 holidays a year won't satisfy you. 4 women won't satisfy. You keep going higher and higher and higher. The more you do that, the harder it becomes for you. So what does the Prophet ﷺ say? He says, look to those below you and don't look to those above you. And wallahi, it's like a weaning process. It's like there's a process to this. So if you now lower your gaze, this bar every day, it just comes gradually slowly down, slowly down, slowly down, slowly down. Because we forget things as humans, and that's to our advantage here. So the lower you bring this, wallahi, you find a much more happier life. A much more happier life. And I say this, and let me give you an example with my children, right? So in our house, we don't have any screens. So we don't have TVs or anything like that, or tablets. We just have a laptop. That with my kids, they learn from a Quran teacher in Egypt, and that's all they do, right? But then I remember watching a study that was done, and a scientific study based upon children's development is that boredom is very, very good for children because it creates a sense of appreciation and a lack of entitlement for them. You give them less things, and then you basically are able to have a child that is much more grateful and happier. And subhanAllah, I remember when we moved out of my parents' house last year. And when we moved out of my parents' house, I've noticed my son's behavior change fully. There was a big, 65-inch, TV. My dad had his phones and tablets, etc. Everything. Whenever I used to tell my son off, my mum would come in and be like, stop, just like, move me away. And I'm sorry, come on, man, I'm trying to parent him here, but you're not letting me. And so it was difficult, and his behavior was good, but it wasn't really at the level that I wanted it to be. When we moved out, My son now, in the beginning, it was difficult for him. He's like, I want to go back to grandma's house. I want to go back to grandma's house. Why? Because that's where he used to gratify himself. That's where he used to basically get what he wanted straight away. Obviously, we didn't send them back, etc. We maybe go once a week or go there for Jummah, etc., have dinner with the family, and that's it, whatever. Now, there's been this kind of, process of this weaning process now. He's basically now, alhamdulillah, he's sober, you could say. And I've noticed in his behavior, massive changes in his behavior. Why? Because he was always feeling deprived in the beginning, but then he accepted that, okay, this is my reality now. And as a 6-year-old, you accept things quickly. And now, Allah, alhamdulillah, things have changed massively. But I want you guys to understand something, and that is that I took my son out to the park, and he had a school project where he had to take a picture in a field. He took a picture in a field, and then what ended up happening is I then brought him back, got him like a little sweet from the shop, whatever, etc. Him and his sister, they can only buy something for 50p or a pound, whatever. They have a pound each, buy a sweet, come home. So think about this. I took them out, took a picture in the field, got some sweets, went back home. In the car, I say to my son, I say, did you have a good time? He's like, oh yeah, daddy, I loved it. It was so good. Yeah, daddy, I loved it. We went to the field, we took a picture, got some sweets. I think, subhanAllah, like, this is crazy. It's like, if you want to make them happy, it's actually very, very easy because they don't have standards. You create the standards for them. I'll give you an example. My wife, sometimes she says that if I take my son to Jummah, if I take him somewhere else with me or whatever, she said, oh, pack him some lunch. When did he eat last? He ate an hour ago. I'm coming back in 3 hours. Yeah, but just pack him some lunch. He's gonna get tired. You've created that expectation. You've instilled that in him that he needs to do this. It's like one of my aunties giving his children 2 showers a day. Now the child is 14 years old and has to have 2 showers a day. Otherwise, he feels dirty, he feels deprived, he feels he can't function in his life. Why? Because what we do is we basically project our insecurities, our problems, our fears, our phobias onto our children, how they will be. And women do this most of the time. And what that then happens is the child has no standard. The child can go dirty for 4 days. It doesn't really make a difference to him. But the fact that if you washed him twice a day, ironing all his clothes twice, he won't be happy unless he has ironed clothes and has been washed twice a day. So you decide the level of your child's contentment and happiness. SubhanAllah, you can actually decide how happy this child becomes, how grateful this child becomes, how content this child becomes by simply consciously taking certain things away that make them entitled. Certain people, they basically give them tablets just to shut them up so that they can do their own thing, etc. Wallahi, that's very, very bad. I don't want this to become a parenting workshop, but I'm honestly saying that these things I've learned with active parenting with my son, because I work from home, so I'm present all the time. And I see that, subhanAllah.
Same of these tablets, bro.
Sorry? So for me, this is what I have observed. And I've also found that in my life, whenever I have gone through a lengthy period of lowering my gaze, a lengthy period of reducing my screen time, a lengthy period of looking at those deprived, those lower than me, I can simply then in a moment in sujood say, oh, Ya Allah, Allahumma inni ala dhikrika wa shukrika wa husni ibadatik. Oh Allah, allow me to be grateful to you. Help me to be grateful to you. Help me to remember you and worship you in a good way. Then you start to activate that spiritual muscle where you ask Allah for, to be grateful. You ask Allah to worship Him better. You ask Allah to remember Him better. Couple that now with a sense of genuine humility, where you find no sense of fakeness in your heart, that you know you are weak. You know that you in front of Allah Azza wa Jal are nothing. When you can establish these things together, you find this sweetness in your ibadah, brothers. You find this sweetness that you can't find anywhere else. And therefore, my parting advice to all of you is live a life understanding and knowing that you have the power to control your contentment and happiness, the thing that we all chase. And if you actively pursue that, and if you actively do that, you will find that in your life, Wallahi, we could have holidays, we could have all these big things, we could have money, we could have a little bit of money. Whatever your circumstances, your life now and your happiness becomes less about circumstance and more about what's inside you. And that's a very, very powerful feeling and a very liberating feeling, a feeling and a sense of you own your own contentment and happiness. Practice that, brothers, inshallah, and practice once you're able, practice a sense of active deprivation, where you basically reduce your screen time, reduce your dopamine levels, reduce and lower your gaze. When you start to do these things, you will find in front of you, over time, it's not going to happen straight away, by the way, it's going to happen over time, that you will find a sense of contentment, happiness, and gratitude, which again is within your own powers. May Allah Azza wa Jal allow us to be people of genuine shukr and genuine humility. We ask Allah Azza wa Jal to guide us and forgive us and to make us and our families people who are not entitled and people who are grateful to Him for everything that He's given us. Ameen ya Rabb. Sallallahu alaihi wa baraka ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Oh yeah.
Please. The Sheikh has the Sheikh has some commentary.
First of
Okay.
all, Jazakallah khair. Maybe it is not, I don't always enjoy what I listen, because in my age I hear a lot actually from different places, but I enjoy it obviously, and it was effective. And when it affects a person of 3/4 of century, then it means a lot actually, because we rust at that age, or supposed to be rust. Anyway, you mentioned Hadith al-Rasul alayhi salatu wasalam, to look down and to look to those who are below. Actually, in all Hadith of Prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam, and even in the verses, they do always balance between who is up and who is down, which means that we have to look up. And you mentioned that inclusive. Yeah. We have to look up to those who are doing the best. Because we are not perfect. We people, we are not perfect. And yesterday I talked to Brother Muhammad Hijab that one of our major issue may be that we look to the prophets and to the companions and even to the followers and even to the imams like Abu Hanifa and others in a very ideal perspective, which is not true. They are a human being and they did also mistakes. They did something humanity. We have to look to them in the balance. Therefore, actually, to do that, to look down, we have also to look up to those who are giving the best and to be to success in our fields. Yani, as you see, when you talk about Abdurrahman bin Auf, he was at the top of the wealth in his time, but at the same time, he was practicing like the monks in his life, in his daily life. While from business point of view, he was at the top. Prophet Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam, when he practiced the leadership, he was number one. Yeah, no doubt about it. Even Bernard Shaw, according to what we read in the literature, he said to the Lord's Council, one time they were arguing about the war, I think that the Second World War, and he said, look, all you're arguing is nothing. If Muhammad is here, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he will start just during drinking his. We have to be the model at the top of perfect to do whatever the most. I don't know if we can do the perfect, but we have to do our best in our business. Like you, and you, mashallah, when you speak, you give us like a high standard of delivering the idea, which is most important. I mean, how do we feel it? And when we practice whatever we practice, if you are a student, you have to be number one. If you are a chemist, you have to be number one. If you are a speaker, you have to be number one. If I'm a grandfather, I have to be number one.
Barakallah feek. No, Sheikh, thank you so much. I'm just going to echo what Sheikh mentioned, and that is obviously the hadith has a second part to it. As I look to those below you when it comes to the dunya, and when it comes to your religion, obviously look to those above you. And at the same time, this should never ever contradict ulu al-himma, having high aspirations. Because at the same time, we've been given a gift in the West, especially Muslims with surplus wealth and people who have a lot of gifts and ni'mas. We should try and obviously make use of those, whether that's in an economical sense, whether that's in a leadership sense, in whatever capacity. This doesn't mean that you don't strive to become the best in what you do or your field or your area. As Sheikh brilliantly clarified, this is not mutually exclusive. It's not basically live like a poor man. That's not what anyone's saying, but simply for your heart. So I'm talking from a more of a qalbi spiritual perspective that will cure the rust in our hearts. That's the perspective I'm speaking about, from a dunya perspective and from a perspective of using the wealth, using your status, using your leadership, using your power, etc., to try and be the highest. I mean, look, for myself, one of the things I said to myself is, when I started doing social media, it was less than 2 years ago. And I said to myself, subhanAllah, what I want to do is I want to learn this skill in a way that I'm able to basically accelerate and save years on my life, because I don't want to be figuring things out. So I learned the art of filmmaking and these sort of things, etc., because I wanted to just say, look, I want to do things with ihsan. I want to do things at a high standard. I want to do things in the best way that represents Islam in the best way as well. So therefore, those things, serving Islam, becoming, good and utilizing your skills, being a service to others, etc., all of these things, we have to have high standards, because at the end of the day, there's a massive responsibility on us, on all of us. When it comes to your qalb, your contentment, your happiness, your inner state, this is an area where we have to, which is somewhat neglected, and there's very little kind of attention that we pay to that. Have the balance, inshallah. And thank you, Sheikh, for mentioning that. I forgot to actually mention that, so appreciate it. Barakallah feek.
We complete each other.
Yes, alhamdulillah. Thank you. Jazakallah khair.
Like, I think that was very, very nice. And rather than doing an activity, did the brothers do the morning exercise?
I believe there's
I clearly didn't. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah.
maybe we could do that.
If we go get some fresh air, we chill by the beach for the hour. Don't go far away too much. Just this beach right in front of us. That way, just cross the road all the way to the bottom.